In this video, I'm going to rank every unusual scout hat in Team Fortress 2 based on their sellability and profitability. This does not include multi-class unusuals, as I'm going to save those for another video. And of course, the various effects themselves and market inflation would influence the tier listings, but I think that with my years of experience in specializing in the unusual market, I can give a roughly accurate estimation on what the relevant tier rankings are in 2025. If you're interested in receiving personalized trading advice from me, alongside many other valuable trading benefits, check out the school group at the top of the description. Likewise, my free Discord server is also at the top of the description. Let's name the tier rankings that I'm going to use. The S tier is called liquid, meaning that the unusuals in this tier will almost always sell very fast in comparison to most unusuals in the market due to their aesthetics and uniqueness. They also have very few flaws or weaknesses in most situations. A tier will be called excellent. They're very close to being the best unusual hats, but they have a couple of flaws which limit their potential. B tier is solid, referring to the unusuals being a good choice when picking a hat and can make good profit, although they may pose a few problems that can cause loss of profit if you're not careful. Next is C tier, which we'll just call alright. The unusuals here can be good or bad depending on the effect, but they can still make a decent profit if you make a good choice. D tier is the mediocre tier, where the unusuals will start to take a while before they sell and may pose risk in your trading most of the time. E tier is the bad tier, in which you should likely avoid these unusuals unless you get an incredible deal, because it's almost always not going to be worth the time to sell. F tier is the cancer tier, in which these unusuals are going to be very unsellable for several reasons, such as inflation, market competition, and low margins. You should pretty much avoid these at all costs, and it's very unlikely you would even find a good deal on these in the first place. The N/A tier, non-applicable tier, will basically just mean that I don't have enough data or experience to support my claim in the tier levels, so I'll put it in this tier. However, I will still try to comment something based on looks and market conditions. Let's begin with the two newest Scout Unusuals from Scream Fortress 2024 and Smithsmith 2024. The Strikeout is a pretty cool Scout Unusual which looks like a replica of the batter's helm with the baseball embedded into it, but I don't know exactly how well it sells currently, but it looks like something in the C to D tier. However, it's just gonna go in N/A for now. The Crimbo Cap released only last month with 250 in existence right now, so it's quite difficult to price this thing. Generally, Smithsmith hats aren't that special, and this hat seems to be one of the worst, or euphemistically, least best hats from this case, so it seems like it would be something in the D tier, but it goes in N/A for now. Now going into priced unusuals from the bottom up, the Fried Batter is an E tier hat. It's the worst hat from its summer case, and I've owned many of these before with various different effects, but I often get stuck with them for months before I have to make a move, get undercut, or just quick sell them. It's not F tier only because it has made me profit before, and the market conditions aren't catastrophically horrible. Next is the Throttle Head, which I would put in E tier. It's not as bad as the Fried Batter because it actually has a few effects which could push into the D tier or even the C tier, but regardless, it's still not a great hat to sell. Many of its effects have flooded markets in which you will have to struggle to sell your hat, and you will have little profit margin to work with. Next is the Boston Brain Bucket, which I would again put in E tier. I've been stuck with one of its case effects for nearly 2 years, and I have a couple of generic effects that I've owned for several months now, but I've been able to sell a couple for profit, so E tier makes sense for me. Next is the Air Dog, which will probably be one of the only hats which will be in F tier. On the surface, it looks alright, but its market conditions are by far the worst out of every hat on this list due to one reason. People mass unboxing the Mayflower case to try and get an unusual Gauze Gaze or Herald's Helm during special events for super expensive limited effects on a quick switch misc, but instead get a crappy Air Dog with very high supply. Very high supply means more competition. More competition means harder to sell and lower profit margins, which both mean terribly unsellable and unprofitable. Hephaestus' Handcraft can go in C tier. It looks quite nice and has limited effects dating back to 2018, and a few effects are very hard to sell due to supply issues, but overall it's not bad. You may be able to snag a few deals and resell for decent profit when flipping this hat. Next is the First Blood, which can go in C tier. It's a nice looking hat with the classic generic effects, but its massive downfall is the inflation. This hat has at least tripled in price for every effect, and it makes this hat very unaffordable for your potential buyers who just want a nice scout hat in their loadout. For instance, the Miami Knights First Blood used to go in the mid 20 key range 3 to 4 years ago, and now it has buyers at 60 keys. Next is the bottle cap, which I would put in B tier. It generally has solid market conditions, sells reasonably decently, and is not very inflated, so overall the most common drawbacks are mitigated in this hat, and I will say it's solid overall. Next is the Commonwealth Commando, which I don't really have much experience with, nor is it well priced, as only 2 effects have prices on backpack.tf due to only being released 5 months ago, but judging by its looks and market conditions, I would put it in C tier. It seems like a hat that would be inflated in the future and have certain case effects have super high supply, so overall C tier is fair, at least as of now. The runner's warm-up is a C tier hat, which is mainly due to inflation and high supply issues, especially amongst 3rd gens, but 1st gen, 2nd gen, and every other gen seems to be alright supply-wise. Next is the Scout Shako, which I'm putting in D tier. The 3rd gen effects have crazy high supply, and even the other effects still struggle to sell, with many trading bots constantly undercutting each other, and the amount of sellers on the market. I can't recall selling one before, but everything indicates that it is mediocre overall. Next is the California cap, which I'm putting in D tier. Its main issue is very high supply, as most hats I inspected for sale have flooded markets, which includes both generic and case effects. It gets some points though, as the newest limited effects can sell pretty well, but that's pretty much the only positive. Next is the Brimmed Bootlegger, which was released in summer 2023, and probably a shocker to you and myself, I have to put this in S tier. I was initially thinking B tier and then A tier, but this hat literally satisfies every criteria I'm looking for. It's aesthetic because it's an actual nice looking hat for Scout, the markets are not flooded on any effects, including the case effects which have nearly 200 in existence each, buy orders are not inflated, it's still selling really consistently despite getting slightly more expensive since release. I've sold this hat plenty of times before, I just have to put this in S tier as of this upload. Next is the Year Oiled Baker Boy, which is the robo version of the Year Old Baker Boy, and I'm putting this in E tier. Aside from 3rd gen effects, its supply isn't very high, but it also doesn't sell well, it doesn't look good, it's inflated, and 3rd gens are impossible to sell due to supply. I don't see why you would buy this instead of the Year Old Baker Boy, unless you're on a strict budget, and many people would agree with me on that, so I'm going E tier for this hat. Next is the Wingman from Scream Fortress 2016. This hat has a lot for me to talk about, but overall its ranking is C tier. Since this hat is from the Creepy Crawly collection case, which is worth 4 keys now each, oh my god, since when, it's not going to be unboxed nearly as frequently anymore, making the newest limited effects extremely rare and often one of one. This is kind of a bad thing for sellability since the price is going to be extremely high, and only an interested collector would pay that price. Generic effects aren't that common either, as of after 8 years of this case existing, none of the Gen 1 to 3 effects have more than 10 in supply. Some of them are reasonably priced, but some are inflated because of this reason. The hat itself looks quite wacky as it's a whole chicken on your head, but I kinda like it to be honest. Namely its 4 case effects, which are Neutron Star, Starstorm in Slumber, Starstorm Insomnia, and Tesla Coil, have over 200 in supply each. All of their markets are always flooded, but the hat sells very fast but for a small margin. Taking all of this into consideration, I think C tier is the correct ranking for this hat. Next is the Big Elfin Deal. Now I don't know what it is about Christmas themed hats in TF2, but most of them are straight up garbage and the Big Elfin Deal is no exception as it goes in E tier. Random effects are inflated, the most popular effects such as Cloud9 or Miami Knights aren't very expensive, yet still don't sell. Low tier effects have extremely flooded markets. I've rarely sold this hat before, despite owning a few right now for a long time already. The only reason I'm not putting this in F tier is because the Air Dog is just so bad in of itself, and at least this hat has some margins on some effects, unlike the Air Dog. Next is the Batter's Helm. On the surface, it looks like a pretty decent looking hat. I don't think many would disagree on that. However, since this hat hasn't been unboxable since January 25th, 2013, despite supply being between 10 to 30 for most effects, this hat has continued to get more and more expensive, and in 2025 has inflated like crazy. Some of the cheapest effects are Smoking at 20 keys, Purple Confetti at $49, Massed Flies at 32 keys, Blizzardy Storm at 39 keys, Vivid Plasma at 55 keys, And I'm telling you, this hat never sells because it's far too inflated due to supply, and the sales reflect that. All of the effects have outdated prices, and not one effect is selling below or at that outdated price. It's always above. Therefore, I have to put this in E tier shockingly. Next is the bombing run. This is unsurprisingly an intended low tier unusual, plus it has very high supply on almost every effect. It doesn't look terrible, the markets aren't that horrible, and it isn't inflated, so overall I'd give the bombing run a C tier. You pay for what you get. Next is the Bonk Leadwear, which is the robo version of the Bonk helm. On many of the hats I sampled, the prices are moderately inflated with a couple of sellers here and there with a few past sales. Overall, I'd give it a D tier ranking. Next is the Punk's Palm, which is a commander grade scout hat from the Blue Moon collection. This hat attracts many limited effects as the Blue Moon case is still very cheap and it does look quite nice. However, this hat has some extremely inflated limited and generic effects, which makes this rarely sell. But once in a while, if it does sell, you'll make a lot of profit. Personally, I'd avoid holding onto one of these if you're not a high tier trader. Overall, I'm going C tier as it has high potential, but it takes a very long time and it can be risky. Next is the Hermes. Many of the effects on this hat are ridiculously inflated, while some consistently sell really well for a reasonable price. The supply is very high on this hat, but usually there's not more than 2 to 3 sellers at a time. But still, when buying a Hermes, your profit margin is going to be quite low, and it's often a struggle to sell without a good market and many past sales. So I'm going C tier. Next is the Death Racer's helmet, which is a commander grade scout hat from the Gargoyle collection, which is 5.25 keys nowadays each. Buying any limited or generic effect which are extremely scarce, or even any case effects which have around 20 in existence each, is not going to be worth it because the hat is far too expensive for anyone to consider buying only because it's from a rare case. Perhaps you could fetch a few sales with some case effects which aren't too bad, but I have to put this in D tier at the highest. Next is the Millennial Mercenary, which is an assassin grade scout hat from the Winter 2018 cosmetic case. Not that many of these exist in unusual quality, so you'll probably not own one of these anytime soon. However, it being so rare due to being pink grade despite being 6 years old has caused every effect to be quite inflated. It's getting more expensive because it's rare, yet demand isn't keeping up because this hat is not exceptional enough to warrant super high prices. Therefore, I'm putting it in D tier trading wise. Next is the frickin' sweet Ninja Hood. Immediately this hat looks very good and it is popular. The only drawback I would say it has is that the prices of various effects are all over the place. Some are reasonably priced, but some are inflated, and it's not really a pattern to tell unless you do your research. Overall, I think it's an A tier scout hat. Next is the Pomade Prince, which is a scout hat in which there is no hat. This is quite a popular scout unusual cosmetic, but nowadays it has gotten pretty inflated on many effects, and I have quite a few which I own right now, which have been unsold for over 6 months, but I do get the rare high profit margin sale every now and then, so I'll go C tier overall, but it will take a while to sell. Next is the Bonk Beanie, which is an assassin grade scout hat from the Smithsmith 2023 collection. Like the Millennial Mercenary, I don't like pink grade unusuals because it boosts up the price and it just won't sell unless it looks exceptional. In this case, it's not exceptional. There's very few sales on this unusual hat as a whole, despite being a year old, which definitely tells you something about its sellability. I think it can go in E tier. Next is the Barg and Bicorn, which is also a commander grade scout hat from the Gargoyle collection, and it seems to be very similar to the Death Racing helmet, but it's slightly rarer and has slightly more sales, so overall it goes a tier above in the C tier. Next is the Fortunate Son, which is a commander grade scout hat from the Gunmetal cosmetic case, which costs over 4.5 keys nowadays. Due to this reason, it has gotten insanely inflated even for the most generic effects, such as circling TF logo at 129 keys. Likewise, limited effects are insanely rare and so expensive that no one would ever pay that price except that 1 in a million collector. Overall though, it is actually a nice hat, so I think you could quick sell this for decent profit fast if you pick up a good deal, and I'm putting this in C tier as of now. Next is the Baseball Bills Sports Shine, which basically removes the Scout's default hat. This is one of those weird cases where unusual variants are insanely rare, so the prices are just stupidly high due to low supply, and it's automatically a pain to sell. You and I would likely never own one of these since it would be incredibly rare for a deal to pop up on the market, but theoretically if you did get one of these for cheap, just requixel it and it will sell fast. E tier. Next is the Year Old Baker Boy, which is quite a popular scout hat. It's a little bit inflated nowadays, but it sells pretty decently with the right market conditions, which isn't too uncommon. Overall, I think it's a B tier. Next is the Bonk Helm. It's a nice looking scout hat, but its biggest issue is definitely high supply. It's not very inflated because of this reason. However, there are lots of market competitors, which kills profit margins, as it's difficult to get an absolute margin of at least 20%, even if you bought it for buy orders. It sells decently though, so if you can find a good market, you can definitely profit well. Overall, I'm putting it in the C tier. Next is the Greased Lightning. It's a pretty nice scout hat, but the problem is how much this hat has inflated alongside the numerous sellers on unsold markets. In order to make a decent profit from this hat, you'd have to first get lucky with good market conditions, but after that it should be alright. Overall, I think it's D tier. Next is the Milkman. It's a nice looking scout unusual, but this severely suffers from inflation, and a few effects have a lot of unsold sellers. You'd have to get lucky to get a decent deal of this hat, but after that you should be able to sell it quickly. Overall, it's a C tier. Next is the Herald's Helm, which is a quick switch mist from the Mayflower collection. If you don't know what quick switch means, let me demonstrate it for you here. I have an unusual hat in slot 1 in loadout A. In loadout B, I have an unusual Herald's Helm in slot 2. I now click loadout A and click the Herald's Helm really fast, and if you did it correctly, you'll see this blacked out item menu. Now loadout A has stacked 2 unusual hats on at once, including 2 effects, which shows for everyone in game and stays like this until you revert the glitch yourself. This works because the Herald's Helm is a whole head region hat, and there's some bug that lets you combine it with another unusual hat. As for trading, I typically don't like low tier unusual effect MISC, and for quick switch MISC, that extends to low to medium tier effects. But other than that, high tier generic effects and high tier limited effects sell really well on the Herald's Helm. You can quick sell these really fast, and if you're patient, can sell these for full price and make a lot of profit. Because it's such a unique hat that every class doesn't have, I have to put this in S tier. Next is the Whoopee Cap. I'm not a fan of it myself since there is often a lot of sellers, inflation and low profit margins, but it is decently popular. My experiences say D tier, but on average it's realistically a C tier. Next is the Front Runner, which is a very nice scout hat that sells decently, however it's often a little bit inflated and has a few sellers competing with you. Overall, I think it's a B tier, and it's better than everything below it in terms of trading. Next is the El Jefe, which looks pretty good, but for some reason this hat is just insanely inflated and most effects have at least 2 sellers and have been unsold for quite some time. I think that the only redeeming quality is that if you snag that rare deal with an optimal market, you can quick sell it fast or be patient to sell it for a high price. Overall in 2025, the El Jefe is in D tier. Next is the Mountebank's Mask, which I'm actually forced to put in the N/A tier. The reason being is that this hat is just so insanely rare because it was only unboxable from the Nice Winter Crate 2014 from December 15, 2024 to February 3, 2015, and the vast majority of the remaining supplies in dead backpacks or the wealthiest trader backpacks looking to resell for an insanely high price. So I can guarantee, almost guarantee, that you will not find a deal of these popping up anytime soon. Same goes for the Lightning Lid for a similar reason. This is an elite grade scout hat from the Rainy Day collection, and even though the case isn't very expensive, this unusual is just so rare that less than 40 of these exist after 7.5 years, and most of that supply is likely to be in top 100 backpacks looking to resell for an insane price, and have already waited months with no offers in sight. Therefore, it's the last unusual to go in N/A. Next is the Fed Fighting Fedora, which is a very nice scout hat which is very popular. However, it suffers from a little bit of inflation, especially among mid-tier generic effects. And it has a lot of sellers likely due to high supply. However, if you can find a good market with a decently popular effect, you should be able to pull through and quick sell quickly, or be patient to resell for full price without much trouble. I'm going to put this in C tier. Next is the Backwoods Ball Cap. It's a very nice scout unusual, but after that it mostly falls short. It has a lot of sellers, it is very inflated, and tends to sell slowly. Maybe if you're lucky you could quick sell this or resell for full price with a good market, but it can't go higher in D tier due to its flaws. Next is the Troublemaker's Tossle Cap. It's a very good looking hat like the last two, however this hat is insanely inflated. Some effects have a few sellers, but nearly every effect has a lot of medium to long term unsold sellers. Again, if you were to find a really good market with a decently aesthetic effect, you could net some nice profit whether quick selling or holding, but overall it has to be D tier in terms of trading. Next is the Flipped Trilby. It's a nice hat, it's not too inflated on average, and it sells quite frequently. But the biggest issue is the supply of these. High supply means a lot of sellers, and the unusual Flipped Trilby has a lot of them. Overall though, it should be mostly a decent hat to flip and can go in the B tier. And lastly, we have the unusual Bonk Boy, which is the Scout's only official unusual misc. This hat lets you wear two unusuals at the same time without even having to do the quick switch glitch like the Herald's Helm. In general, I dislike any kind of low tier effect on an unusual miss, in which you can find my various reasons here in this video, but an aesthetic effect on the Bonk Boy is going to be expensive and get great offers. And regardless of any unusual Bonk Boy you have, it's going to be liquid, which is the name of the S tier, so the Bonk Boy goes to S tier. And that's every scout hat that can be an unusual variant ranked based upon sellability and profitability. Remember that this list is not definitive and that there are many exceptions to the rule. This ranking is merely based upon my experience and research, and I encourage you to do your own digging for the best results. Remember to check out the school group and the Discord server in the top of the description. Thanks for watching this video, leave a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I hope you make a lot of profit and smash your goals this year in 2025. See ya!